Okay, so back in the 90s, Sega released the original trilogy of Sonic games, Sonic 1, 2, as well as 3 and K. 3 and K is a true version. Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles are not separate games. They're two parts of the same one. You will not change my mind on that. Anyway, so they released the first three Sonic games back in the 90s as well as CD as well. And yeah, then in the early 2000s they released Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, which were these new types of games. Then they started making the Boost formula games and Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations, and people were annoyed because they did not really maintain the classic formula of the Sonic games, which personally I will note is far better than the original, than at least Mario, which is its main competitor. Mario, it's like in the original games at least you had to play through the game again and again, but it's like the level's the same every time, whereas with this, it's like there's multiple paths available. Also, the game design of rings is way better than coins. Look, Sonic has way better game design than Mario, but that's besides the point. So yeah, so Sonic Generations had both Sonic and like 3D Sonic and 2D Sonic in it, and it was explained as like, oh, the Sonic from the past is coming back via time travel, and so now he's going through and doing 2D stuff because that's how his games worked, and so on and so forth. And yeah, that was a thing. Then they used the engine from Sonic Generations to make a game called Sonic the Hedgehog 4, which was a bit of a bloated mess. For one, it didn't operate in the style of the 2D games. Instead, it was basically just a boost formula game where you couldn't really go left and right and could only jump. The problem with that being that it's not what actually people liked about the 2D games. It wasn't just that they're 2D, for that matter, pixel art as well. It's not a necessity, but it's also a well liked thing about them. But also, these didn't really have a design for that. Plus, they decided to release in a weird episodic cycle, and then they didn't even finish the three episodes. Yeah, that was a big mess. But then in 2016, Sega announced Sonic Mania at some big convention about the 25th anniversary of Sonic. Look, I was 9 at the time. I didn't know about Sonic Mania until 2017. Cut me some slack. So anyway, yeah, they announced that it's a new 2D Sonic game, and at the time it was revered as being the first good Sonic game in a long time, and, well, at least the first good 2D Sonic game, there's a lot of controversy out there about the quality of different Sonic games, believe it or not. It seems to shift over time a lot as well, but besides the point. So in this video, I'm going to at least... Well, I do think there's things worth praising about it. I do think that 6 years on from its release, I think there are some questions to be asked about the hypothesis or belief or the idea or whatever the fuck you want to call it, that the game is super excellent. I do think it has some major flaws that were glossed over back at the time. So, since this game was made for the 25th anniversary, and it was also the first 2D Sonic game that isn't whatever the hell Sonic 4 was, for the better part of 25 years, not 25 years, but, well, actually, yeah, for like 22 years or whatever, or would have been 23 years between 94 and 2017, besides the point. But given that, and the fact that it was an anniversary game, the game ended up being quite reliant on nostalgia. There was a lot of references to the old games, and most of the stages were also from older games, as in 8 out of 12. The fan surface was good, but, well, the problem with this is it means that the game doesn't really have its own identity in my mind, because it's like, most of the levels here are from older games. I mean, I guess I know because Classic Collection, for some ungodly reason, doesn't have Sonic CD. Metallic Madness, and Starlight Speedway are kind of like their own thing to me. That I associate with Mania, especially Metallic Madness, since it doesn't have the time travel thing and isn't as iconic from CD. But another thing is, because all these games took place in their respective settings from their original games, they're all just kind of strung together nonsensically. Like, the game doesn't really have a coherent sense of place. Like, South Island is a place, it's not that coherent, but it exists. Like, I could make up zone transitions for those. They don't feel like they're on opposite sides of the world or anything. Same goes for West Side Island and Angel Island with Sonic 3 and K. We have actual zone transitions, and so that in particular is a really coherent setting. And whereas this is just like, oh, random places, and the zone transitions are very unnatural most of the time. Like, as in a lot of like half the zone transitions in this are, oh, Dr. Eggman used the Phantom Ruby to teleport Sonic to the next stage he has to run through because it's one of the very most well remembered stages from the classic games. And between those two things, either that or it's a new stage, and the new stages are just kind of there, randomly floating around, not particularly connected to anything. They're just it's weird. The game doesn't have a lot of identity, and it's also kind of incoherent, which leads me on to my next point. The game is narratively quite lacking, which I know it's a 2D platformer. I don't expect it to have any fucking Final Fantasy Undertale level, super advanced deep plots, but like, Sonic games have been relatively complex for platformers. Like, in most Sonic games, unlike your average Mario game, there is plot beats and progression on some level. You know, like Sonic 3 is a really good example of this. It's best of the original trilogy in my opinion, for obvious reasons. But first of all, it shows. First of all, Sonic and Tails are investigating Angel Island. He turns into Super Sonic as he investigates. Then this weird, powerful guy called Knuckles punches the Chaos Emeralds right out of him, takes it, runs away because he's been tricked. And then later, and it turns out he's been tricked by Dr. Eggman into what's it? He's been tricked by Dr. Eggman into thinking that Sonic's a bad guy, so then Sonic has to run through, he gets the Chaos Emeralds, then, or maybe he doesn't, then Eggman tries to relaunch the Death Egg the first time, he stops him, albeit I'll admit this was because of the way the game had to be split in two for time constraint reasons involving McDonald's tie-ins. And then after beating Long Space Zone, then suddenly we're in it's the fungus zone. It's Mushroom Hill zone. Then we get introduced to Knuckles and then Hypersonic, which again this was introduced so we'd still have Chaos Emeralds to collect on our save files where we'd already gotten all the Chaos Emeralds because the games came out a year apart, Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, but still Hypersonic's cool. Then later on as we progress through the game, nothing really happens for a while until we get to Lava Reef Zone where we have a fake Eggman boss. Then we go into Hidden Palace Zone where it's like, ooh, super weird Chaos Emerald lore and shit. Then we see the Knuckles fight, and then we see a big tapestry showing Sonic fighting against Dr. Eggman as a prophecy. The Knuckles fight in Hidden Palace Zone is the real final boss of Lava Reef, I'll note. Then Then Dr. Eggman betrays Knuckles and reveals he's evil to him by stealing Master Emerald to power the Death Egg. Then suddenly Knuckles realizes he's being misled. Then he leads us up through Sky Sanctuary Zone. Then after that, we have to beat through Sky Sanctuary Zone, then defeat the Death Egg for the final time. That had 3 or 4 plot beats. It wasn't just, oh, the bad guy stole the MacGuffin, and then there's no plot beats until, oh, we got the MacGuffin back at the end. Whereas with this, it's like, we see the hard-boiled heavies take the Phantom Ruby, and then, we just kind of play through the levels until the game ends. Titanic Monarch Zone, it's not really built up throughout the game. Like, I guess it's a mech suit pretty obviously based on the design of of Eggman's final boss fight, and also the fact it's a giant fucking robot. But, there's no build-up to it. I mean, I guess it was added in one of the zone transitions later on, which I'll get into later, the problems with that, but regardless, I guess that's foreshadowing that's, it came out of nowhere. It's like, if Eggman's gonna build a giant machine to take over the world, and considering this game's so nostalgia-based, why not have it just be Death Egg Zone again? Like, Dr. Eggman's rebuilding the Death Egg, but now it can teleport around with the Phantom Ruby. That would have made more thematic sense considering that this game's nostalgia-bait, but and then we see Dr. Eggman and Heavy King fighting over the Phantom Ruby, and apparently the hard-boiled heavies are supposed to be in a rivalry with Eggman over the Phantom Ruby, except the game does nothing to convey that.
This is me in editing. I just want to note that what I'm about to say is talking about 3 and K, quite cutting that, not Mania. Bye.
It conveys that Knuckles is being tricked by the fact that he trusts Dr. Eggman until he steals the Phantom Ruby, not the Phantom Ruby, the Master Emerald, and by the fact that Knuckles punches Sonic while he's flying Dr. Eggman's thing over to the Death Egg in Long Space Zone. Oh, and Knuckles is also a constant minor antagonist because he can constantly encounter him, and he messes with us. And to be fair, the Phantom Ruby is constantly present. In part because, again, half the zone's transitions are just Dr. Eggman teleporting us with the Phantom Ruby. So, yeah. Also, what does Sonic know to go through Green Hill Zone? I mean, we know how to do the place we're going right, but then still, it's like, why is he doing that? Why does he have any idea where to go or what to do? It's a thing. The plotline makes no sense. Also, why don't we have the Chaos Emeralds anymore? I know we're teleported by the Phantom Ruby. Well, why are we assuming they didn't have the Chaos Emeralds before that point? Did the teleportation get rid of it? This could have been solved if we'd shown him flying into it as Super Sonic, then the Chaos Emeralds being hit out of him by the impact with the piece of rock, or even if he was just no longer Super Sonic after the teleportation. But no, we just inexplicably have to get the Chaos Emeralds again. Oh, and Knuckles. My plot qualms lead into my qualms about how I handled Knuckles in this. Okay, so I'm talking about this here because my qualms of how to handle Knuckles lead on from the narrative qualms, right? So basically, they didn't just so in Sonic 3, obviously Knuckles was an anti-hero, or I guess an anti-villain. What's the how does the quadrant theory of that work? Like an anti-hero is someone who does the right thing for the wrong reasons, and he's an anti-villain in the original Sonic 3 and K, but obviously isn't here because him and Sonic have already, they've made peaceful terms now that knows Dr. Eggman's bad and all that. But yeah, and his explanation for why he's doing that is he's just lying around on Angel Island. Then then suddenly he gets whacked by the giant bit of ground that had had the Phantom Ruby in it after the hard boiled heavies grab it out of the ground. And so suddenly he's teleported, and suddenly he knows to go after the Phantom Ruby as opposed to being like, what? Why the fuck am I in Green Hill? I mean, I guess there's a how does he even see the Phantom Ruby? He doesn't even get a good chance to look at it because it hits him out of nowhere. Like, in Sonic 3 and K, again, going back to the narrative stuff, Knuckles, when you played as Knuckles, you weren't playing the same game, you weren't playing the same narrative as with Sonic and Tails. Instead, the what's the name? Instead, Knuckles Run was an epilogue. Basically, Knuckles Run was an epilogue to the timeline where Sonic have all the Super Emerald, doesn't have all the Chaos Emeralds when he beats the Fig Zone, and so instead of actually recovering the Master Emerald, instead it just ends up lost, and so then that means Knuckles has to recover it. And because he has different abilities, that means he can access different parts of the stage that actually take advantage of his different abilities. Like, he can't jump as high, so they can use that to barrier him off, as well as he can also punch through walls, which Sonic can't, which they can use to barrier Sonic off. Plus, he can also glide and climb, which makes his gameplay more exploration based. And so, yeah, they very much segregate him to different parts of the stages at quite frequent intervals, which Mania only does once or twice. Like, he's in a different place of the Son of Green Hill Zone, and there's one major area, it's like the main area where he gets his own area, as well as he does in Chemical Plant, but other than that, he basically just follows the same plot as the other two. This game's 6 years old and its narrative isn't that great, so I don't know. It's probably not that important to worry about spoilers. I mean, he does serve as the getaway driver in at the end of the game if you don't get all the Chaos Emeralds, and why I'd like to jokingly call it a good ending of Sonic Mania. I'll get to that in a minute or two. But yeah, again, it doesn't even show him interacting with Sonic, except actually interacting with Sonic and them convening it all. I mean, there's no dialogue in this game, and thank fuck for that, so it's kind of hard to convey that, but, you can use indirect storytelling. 3 and K did a good job of that. Like, it's, what, is Knuckles following around trying to figure out, what's, imagine if instead what happened is a question mark bubble appeared above Knuckles' head, and then indicating that he's trying to figure out what's going on. And then later on, we have a scene where they encounter each other at the end of Hydro City Zone, where Tails is flying out with the plane, so they get together. Then after that happens, and so he's trying to reconcile with them because they're the only ones who have any idea what's going on. And so eventually, and then they come up with some explanation for why he's already at the getaway car, as opposed to having it be in his run that Tails is the one with the getaway car, so it's Sonic. Instead, maybe there is no final boss if you're playing as Knuckles. Instead, or maybe you have to fight against the Heavy King inside. Ooh, yeah. What if you had to fight? You already had to fight against the Heavy King in Hidden Palace Zone in Knuckles' run. That's the one ever area where the game diverges in his run. But it wasn't Hidden Palace Zone, but it was the level design of Hidden Palace Zone as the boss of Lava Reef Zone. But what if you had to fight against the more powerful version of the Heavy King in Titanic Monarch? Then after he's beaten up, you then get in the getaway car, and then you help do the getaway for everyone else, for the other characters. That would have been Knuckles should have not just been a replacement for a swap role with Sonic when he plays Run. I think it would have worked better if he just had his own alternate narrative. He was playing alongside Sonic's Run. I don't know. It's the narrative in this is a mess, but yeah, and again, there weren't many different areas where his gameplay diverged. So yeah, that's that whole thing. Knuckles was misutilized in this, I think. Okay. Okay, so after recording the audio, this video's runtime came out longer than expected, and I could put in the effort to make 2 videos to get one video that bombs, but everyone's intimidated by the long watch time plus the fact that it took forever to come out. Those two factors making it bomb, or I could just break into 2 separate videos. So yeah, this is a part 1, part 2. 2 weeks from now, I'll make part 2. I'll release the part 2's this, and then between them I'll do an Undertale video because my channel ain't doing too hot and those videos do stupidly well. If you've watched this far, then you should probably hit like because you clearly enjoyed it and it shows YouTube that you enjoyed it and so it shows it to more people. I'd appreciate that. Also, if you want to see the next part, then I'd recommend subscribing. Makes it more likely YouTube will show it to you. Yada yada. Bye.